I found a document on her laptop that she forgot to close, and from that moment on, everything I thought I knew about my marriage crumbled like a house of cards made of broken promises. 20 years. 20 years I spent serving people, removing tumors, placing bone plates, fighting death every single day in the operating room at Tulsa City Medical Center. 20 years I came home exhausted, sometimes still in my hospital scrubs, smelling of disinfectant and someone else's fear. And all that time, my wife Paris flew around the world. She worked as an international flight attendant for SkyBridge Airlines. We met in college when she was practical and I was an ambitious pre-med student. Her family came from a small town near Oklahoma City just like mine. We told each other we'd have children, though somehow that conversation got lost over the years. Life with my wife and me was like two people on a seesaw who never touched each other at the top. When I was home, she was usually preparing for her next flight. When she was home, I found myself dealing with random medical conferences or surgeries scheduled months in advance. In December, my mother Letitia still told me we needed to pressure each other more often, that family dinners connected people. But it was somewhat naive advice from a woman who never really understood the demands of being a doctor's wife. Paris always considered herself successful and independent. She would quietly show me her social media posts, photos from various airports, arrival lounges, sometimes photos with her crew mid-flight. I used to compliment these photos. Then I did it much more rarely. We both noticed it, but neither of us spoke up. Seeing a therapist would have meant admitting something was seriously broken. Our house in the suburbs of Tulsa was a traditional one-story red brick home with 3 bedrooms and a 2-car garage. We bought it 12 years ago, back when something still held us together. Over time, it started to feel more like a hotel where we both just happened to sleep. On the kitchen table, there were always flight schedule notepads from Paris, my work planner, and bills. No shared meals. Nothing common on that table at all. Luna, our Caucasian shepherd, often sat by the door waiting for someone. I usually assumed she was waiting for Paris. Now I realize Luna was waiting for me when I worked long shifts at the hospital. We often left the dog alone on weekends and she got used to solitude better than we got used to each other. My career had become everything I'd sacrificed for: surgery, cardiology consultations, research papers. I wasn't just a doctor anymore, I was married to my work. And somewhere in all those late nights in the operating room, my marriage died a slow, quiet death while I was fighting to save strangers' lives. Paris's career had taken a different turn though. She'd been with SkyBridge for 13 years, and she'd made it to senior flight attendant status. That meant better routes, more international flights, and significantly more time away from home. We barely discussed her flights anymore. She'd leave with her uniform neatly packed in her roll-on bag, kiss me on the cheek, something that had become mechanical routine, and disappear for 4 or 5 days. When she returned, we'd exchange pleasantries about her flight and my surgeries, and then we'd slip back into our separate routines. My mother Letitia worried about us. She'd mention it every time I visited her small apartment on the north side of Tulsa. "Robyn, you two need to reconnect," she'd say, stirring her coffee. "Marriage doesn't survive on autopilot." I'd nod, smile, and promise things would improve. But I was lying and she knew it. We both knew it. The thing is, when you're married to someone for 2 decades, you don't suddenly stop loving them. Instead, you slowly wake up one day and realize you're not sure if you ever really knew them at all. And that's a different kind of heartbreak than divorce papers. September changed everything. I noticed Paris had started to modify her schedule. She said she'd picked up new routes, but some of them weren't international. They were short flights to Dallas and Denver, places she could reach by car in 2 hours. At first, I didn't pay attention. Then I overheard a phone conversation with one of her friends, with Sarah, where Paris mentioned she was often running late to briefings, even for local Tulsa flights. That was strange. Paris was always punctual, always organized. She was the kind of person who showed up 15 minutes early to everything. Tardiness wasn't in her nature. Then I found the receipt. It was a Tuesday in mid-September, and I was looking through her jacket pocket for her car keys while she was in the shower. I wasn't snooping, at least that's what I told myself. The parking receipt from a garage in Norman was dated just 3 days earlier. Norman. 45 minutes from our home. She told me she had a flight to Denver that day. Norman wasn't on the way to anything. Norman wasn't on the way to the airport. Norman was just a quiet college town 30 miles away, home to the University of Oklahoma and not much else. When I asked her casually that evening about her Denver flight, she was vague. "It got delayed," she said. Actually, it was canceled. Weather system moved in unexpectedly. I knew she was lying because I'd checked the flights online. There had been no cancellations that day. I brought it up with Sebastian, my colleague at the hospital. We were scrubbing in for a triple bypass and I mentioned that my wife seemed to have a weird schedule lately. Sebastian gave me a look, not quite sympathy, not quite judgment. My ex-wife used to do that, he said, working soap under his fingernails. She'd invent flight delays, conferences, training sessions. Turns out she was seeing someone in Edmond. He paused, then added, the lies were worse than the affair, honestly. At least the affair made sense of the lying. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How did you find out? I asked. You don't want to know, Sebastian said, stepping under the water to rinse his hands. But then he added, actually you probably do. I found her iPad open in her car. She'd left it there accidentally. The messages were pretty explicit. December brought more revelations, each one sharper than the last. I noticed Paris was spending more money than usual. Small transactions at coffee shops in Norman. A hotel charge, the Merriweather Hotel, not a luxury place but clean and discreet. Restaurant charges at Harrison's Place, a high-end steakhouse in Norman where I'd never taken her because she'd always said it was too expensive for a simple dinner. But she could afford it when she wasn't with me. I began to track her movements, not to torture myself, but because I needed to know if I was paranoid or if my instincts were right. I purchased a small GPS tracker. Nothing sophisticated, just something I could slip into her car. I told myself it was for safety so I'd know where she was in case of emergency. The lie was transparent even to me. The data told a story I didn't want to believe. Every Tuesday and Thursday without fail, her car would leave our home around 9 a.m. She'd drive northeast, always to Norman. The tracker would show her car stationary for 3 to 4 hours. Sometimes in parking garages, sometimes in residential areas. Then she'd drive back, arriving home around 7 p.m., just in time for dinner, where she'd ask me about my day with a tired smile. On 2 occasions, I drove to Norman myself, parking near the university area. I sat in my car for hours like some kind of private investigator from a bad television show, feeling pathetic and helpless. That's when I decided I needed professional help. His name was Lewis, and he was a former police detective who now ran a small private investigation firm out of a nondescript office building downtown. I met him in early January and I didn't tell him everything. I just said I needed to verify my wife's movements. He didn't ask many questions. People like Lewis had seen everything before. Lewis was 48 years old, professional and discreet. He had the tired eyes of someone who'd spent too many years watching people betray each other. When I hired him, I felt a mixture of shame and desperation. This was what my marriage had come to, hiring someone to follow my wife around like she was a suspect in a crime. The evidence Lewis brought me back hit harder than any surgery I'd ever witnessed. It was simple, damning documentation of betrayal. Photographs showed Paris meeting with a man in his mid-40s at various locations around Norman. They had coffee together at Oracle Coffee, a small place tucked behind a parking lot. They ate lunch at Harrison's Place, sitting in a booth in the back corner, their body language unmistakably intimate. One photograph showed them entering the Merriweather Hotel together, Paris's hand on his arm. In one photograph that Lewis had captured from a distance, they were sitting in his car, a black sedan parked near the OU campus, and Paris was resting her head on his shoulder while he drove. That image destroyed me more than any others. The man was Oscar Hartley. A quick Google search showed me his production company website, Hartley Documentary Productions, based right there in Norman. His photographs showed a reasonably attractive man with dark hair, high cheekbones, and intense eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. His films won local awards. He'd been featured in a few regional publications about independent filmmaking. According to his online biography, he specialized in documentary films about forgotten American stories, cultures fading away, industries disappearing, historical moments being erased by time. There was something romantic about it, something that probably appealed to Paris. She'd always said our life was boring, that we never went anywhere or did anything interesting. Oscar made his life look like an adventure. I looked at his films. Hearts of the Desert. The Last Coal Miners. Where the Rivers Remember. None of them had anything to do with aviation or travel. He didn't seem to have any professional reason to know my wife at all. But he knew her. He knew her very well. I hired Lewis to find out when and where they'd met. According to his research, which he presented to me along with screenshots of their social media interactions, Paris had created a profile on a dating app called Connections about 3 years ago. The profile wasn't under her real name, it was Skylar_28, a version of her identity that made her look 5 years younger than she actually was. Oscar had matched with her and they'd started messaging around 3 years back. 3 years. Not weeks. Not months. 3 years of lying. 3 years of coming home to me, kissing me, lying next to me in bed, all while exchanging messages with someone else. 3 years of building a separate life in a town 30 miles away from ours. I wondered how many of those delays and cancellations and training sessions were actually real. How many times had she lied to my face? How many Tuesday and Thursday flights had she fabricated? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. By late January, I had assembled enough evidence to know exactly what my next move needed to be. But I didn't confront her. That was the one thing I was sure about. I wouldn't give her the chance to spin explanations or ask for forgiveness. Instead, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I would end this marriage on my own terms. I contacted a divorce attorney named Robert Chin, a partner at Chin and Associates in Tulsa. Unlike some attorneys, he didn't try to encourage reconciliation or counseling. He was pragmatic. You have documented evidence of infidelity, he explained to me in his office. That will influence the divorce proceedings. You want to know what that means for asset distribution. What it meant, essentially, was that in Oklahoma, adultery was considered a factor in divorce proceedings. It didn't automatically guarantee me anything. Oklahoma wasn't a fault state in the traditional sense, but it gave us leverage. Leverage I didn't intend to use for money, though Chin didn't need to know that. I want to file quietly, I told him. No drama. Just the paperwork. Most people want to maximize their position in these situations, Chin said, studying me over his reading glasses. I'm not most people, I replied. Clearly not. He paused. I'll need to ask, is there any chance of reconciliation? Any chance you want to try counseling first? I thought about Paris's head on Oscar's shoulder as he drove. I thought about the 3 years of lies. I thought about coming home to someone I no longer recognized. No, I said. No chance at all. The paperwork was prepared with surgical precision. The divorce petition would be filed on February 15th. That was exactly 1 month away, giving me time to prepare for what came next. But before I filed, I needed to execute the second part of my plan. I began to tell people. I mentioned it casually to my mother Letitia over lunch at her favorite cafe near downtown Tulsa. I didn't give her all the details. I knew she'd worry, would want to defend Paris or convince me to reconsider. Instead, I simply said, the marriage isn't working. We've decided to separate. She looked devastated but not shocked. On some level, I think she'd been waiting for this news. Robyn, I'm so sorry, she said, reaching across the table to hold my hand. I know I mentioned you two needed to connect more, but I didn't think it was this bad. It was always going to end this way, I said and meant it. I told Sebastian next, during a break in the operating room. He listened without judgment. I'm sorry, man, he said. I know that's not easy. If you need anything, just let me know. Then I took a more deliberate step. I wrote an anonymous email to someone in the Human Resources Department at SkyBridge Airlines. I didn't reveal that I was Paris's husband. I framed myself as a concerned passenger and fellow employee. The email detailed Paris's increasing absences, her repeated late check-ins, and the pattern of behavior that suggested she was spending her time on personal matters rather than fulfilling her flight attendant duties. I attached nothing. I wanted it to seem like general passenger feedback, the kind of thing that airlines took seriously when it came from multiple sources. I made sure to phrase it carefully. I've noticed that Miss Paris Reed seems to have an increasing pattern of late check-ins and brief disappearances during layovers. As a passenger who flies frequently, this raises questions about her professionalism and commitment to her job. I'm sure this is nothing, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. The email was vague enough to be deniable, but specific enough to trigger an investigation. Human Resources departments at airlines took attendance and professionalism very seriously. One complaint could be overlooked. But if there were patterns. I also took steps to protect my financial assets. I'm not going to lie, I did consult with Chen about what belonged to whom. My medical license, my reputation, my pension, these were things I'd built during our marriage, but they were also things that were intrinsically mine. I couldn't protect those from a divorce and I didn't try. What I could protect was the physical property I'd accumulated. I went to a jeweler in downtown Tulsa and purchased several pieces, Indian emeralds set in black gold, a pair of sapphire earrings, some antique coins from the 1920s. Not for investment purposes, but for the simple reason that I wanted to place them in our home safe, something Paris rarely accessed. These items wouldn't be considered marital property in the same way money was. They were personal possessions, acquired during the marriage but separate from any joint accounts. It felt like I was being careful, but really I was just being strategic. I was playing chess while Paris thought we were just living. The final piece of my plan involved Oscar. I didn't hire Louis to gather more evidence on him. Instead, I had Louis do something simpler. I had him send an anonymous tip to a local media contact, specifically someone who covered arts and entertainment for the Norman Gazette. The tip was simple. Documentary filmmaker Oscar Hartley has been facing accusations from past colleagues that he uses his position to pursue romantic relationships with crew members and associates. Might be worth looking into his professional practices. It was a half-truth wrapped in an insinuation. Oscar did work with women on his projects. He had pursued Paris, though she'd been willing. But suggesting misconduct was enough to plant a seed of doubt. I didn't expect the media to run with it immediately. What I did expect was for Oscar to hear rumors that his reputation was being questioned. And sure enough, within 2 weeks, I noticed through Louis's continued and now unauthorized but helpful surveillance that Oscar seemed more anxious. He took fewer public appearances. His social media activity decreased. Then, 3 weeks before I was set to file for divorce, Oscar did something that surprised me. He dumped Paris. I found out through an intercepted text message that Louis passed along to me. Paris had apparently tried to reach Oscar multiple times, and he'd finally responded with a message that essentially said he needed to focus on his career and personal life, and that their relationship had become a distraction he couldn't afford. Paris called me that evening, tears in her voice. "I don't feel well," she said. "I'm going to cancel my flights this week." "That's fine," I said, my voice steady. "Take care of yourself." She never told me about Oscar. She never confessed to the affair. She just withdrew into a silent depression, and I played the role of the concerned husband, making sure she had water, checking in on her, acting like I didn't know exactly what had shattered her world. February 15th came, cold and gray, the way February in Oklahoma often does. Snow flurries threatened but never fully materialized. My attorney filed the divorce petition, and Paris was served with papers while she was home. There was no way to make it not brutal. Divorce papers are always brutal. But I'd ensured they came as a shock, not as something she'd seen coming. She found me in my study that evening, the papers in her hands. Her face was a mixture of confusion and something that might have been relief. "Robyn, what is this?" she asked, her voice small. "It's divorce papers," I said simply, not looking up from the journal article I was pretending to read. "But, we can talk about this. We can try therapy. We can fix this." I finally looked at her. "We can't fix what's already dead, Paris. It's been dead for a long time. I'm just making it official." "Is there someone else?" she asked. "Is that what this is about?" I almost laughed. The irony was so sharp it cut. "No, Paris. There's no one else. There's just us, and we're not enough anymore." "Please," she said, and I watched her hands shake as she held the papers. "Please, Robyn. We've been together for 20 years. We can't just throw that away." But she already had. She'd thrown it away the moment she decided to create a fake dating profile. She'd thrown it away every Tuesday and Thursday when she drove to Norman. She'd thrown it away the first time she let Oscar kiss her, the first time she lied to me about where she was, the first time she chose him over the marriage she'd promised to protect. "The papers are very fair," I said. 50-50 split on everything. You keep the house if you want, or we sell it and divide the proceeds. Your retirement from SkyBridge remains yours. My medical practice remains mine. We split our bank account. No alimony. No child support. It's clean." "That's not what this is about," she said. "That's not why you're leaving me." "I'm not leaving you," I corrected. "You left me. I'm just formalizing it." She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched something in her face shift. Understanding, maybe. The realization that I knew more than I'd let on. But she didn't ask me directly. She turned and walked out, taking the papers with her. The divorce process moved forward with brutal efficiency. We didn't fight over anything significant. Paris seemed to be in a state of shock throughout the proceedings. She wouldn't confirm my suspicions about Oscar, wouldn't defend herself, wouldn't even seem to understand why I'd decided to end everything so suddenly. But the universe had its own way of taking care of the details. In March, Paris received a formal warning from SkyBridge Airlines. The company had conducted an internal investigation and found a pattern of irregular check-ins and scheduling inconsistencies. She was placed on probation with a required meeting with HR to discuss her future with the company. I heard this through Sebastian, who'd heard it through a colleague whose wife worked in crew scheduling. The grapevine at SkyBridge was apparently very efficient. More importantly, SkyBridge had also flagged her for an extended probation period. She was required to work only domestic flights for the next 6 months, with no flexibility for schedule changes or personal time off beyond what was strictly contracted. It was a professional death sentence for someone like Paris, who thrived on the international routes and the freedom they represented. By April, Paris had begun looking for employment elsewhere. I knew this through the simple expedience of mutual friends mentioning that she was updating her resume and had begun interviewing with other airlines. But her reputation had preceded her. One airline cited concerns about professionalism and attendance. Another seemed interested until they conducted background checks and apparently found something that made them rescind the offer. What they found, I would later learn, was my carefully anonymous email sent to multiple human resources departments. I'd been strategic. I'd framed concerns as coming from different sources, making it seem like there were multiple people worried about Paris's reliability. In the connected world of aviation, that kind of pattern was hard to overcome. By May, Paris had exhausted most options within the major airlines. She was offered a position at a much smaller regional carrier with a pay cut of nearly 40% and routes that were far less prestigious than what she'd previously enjoyed. She took the job because she had no other choice. The finalization of our divorce came through in June. It was handled entirely through the courts. No drama, no custody battles, no fighting. We'd divided everything cleanly and Paris had signed off on it all. Our marriage was officially over, recorded in a court document, filed away in the public record. I kept the house. Luna stayed with me. The emeralds and sapphires remained in the safe where I'd placed them. My medical practice continued as usual. I went back to my routine. Surgeries, consultations, late nights at the hospital, quiet evenings at home. But something had shifted in me. I was no longer angry. Anger is an emotion that requires energy, requires focus. What I felt now was something more distant, more final. It was the feeling of having made a clean cut, of having removed a piece of yourself that had become infected. In July, I attended a medical conference in Oklahoma City. Sebastian was there and we had dinner together. He asked me how I was doing. Better than I have in years, I told him and meant it. I didn't realize how much weight I was carrying until I put it down. She made the right choice being with Oscar? Sebastian asked carefully. Oscar didn't stay, I said. That was the beautiful part. Oscar moved on to someone new almost immediately. I saw it on his social media. He's got a new girlfriend now, someone who works for his production company. I imagine he's already telling her the same things he told Paris, making her feel like she's special, like she's the person who finally understands him. And Paris? Paris is alone, I said simply. She lost Oscar. She lost her career advancement. She lost her home. She lost me. And she did it all to herself. It sounded cruel when I said it out loud like that, but it wasn't cruelty, it was honesty. Paris had made choices. I had simply ensured that those choices had consequences. In August, I saw my mother Letitia for her birthday dinner. She was turning 73, and we went to her favorite restaurant in downtown Tulsa. Over dessert, she said something I wasn't expecting. I ran into Sarah the other day, my mother said. Sarah was Paris's best friend. She mentioned that Paris has moved back with her parents, that she's having a difficult time with everything. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I found that I meant it. I wasn't happy that Paris was suffering. That would make me as damaged as she was. But I wasn't sad either. Do you think? Letitia paused, choosing her words carefully. Do you think there's any chance you two might reconcile? No, Mom, I said firmly. Some things, once broken, shouldn't be put back together. She nodded slowly, understanding that this wasn't a subject I was willing to revisit. That fall, I found myself with more time than I'd had in years. Without the weight of a failing marriage, without the constant background anxiety about what Paris was doing and who she was seeing, I suddenly had space to breathe. I took Luna to the park more often. I started reading books for pleasure rather than research. I attended lectures at the University of Tulsa about history and philosophy, subjects that had nothing to do with medicine. I even had Sebastian over for dinner and we cooked together, something I hadn't done with anyone in longer than I could remember. It felt human. It felt normal. November brought letters from Paris's attorney. Nothing dramatic, just some final administrative items related to the divorce, signatures needed on pension transfers and insurance updates. I handled them all efficiently and sent them back. In one sealed envelope, there was a handwritten letter from Paris herself. I recognized her handwriting immediately. But I didn't open it. I placed it in a drawer in my study and never read it. Some things are better left unknown. Some apologies shouldn't be accepted because they would only complicate the clean break I'd managed to make. By December, exactly a year after I'd first found that document on her laptop, I could look back and say that I'd survived something I didn't think I would survive. The betrayal, the anger, the loss, it had all passed through me like a storm, and I was still standing. I'd learned something important. Revenge isn't about making the other person suffer. It's about ensuring that they face the natural consequences of their actions without your intervention. It's about not playing the victim while also not playing the perpetrator. It's about simply letting the universe balance itself out. Paris had lost her career progression at SkyBridge Airlines. She'd lost Oscar. She'd lost the life she thought she was building. And most importantly, she'd lost the only person who'd been willing to stand by her through anything. Oscar had found a new distraction. He'd moved on, the way men like him always do, leaving broken pieces behind without looking back. And I had discovered that the life I feared losing was actually a life I'd already lost years ago. The marriage I was mourning had been dying since the day Paris decided that one life, the one with me, wasn't enough anymore. I don't think I'm a good person for what I did. But I'm also not a bad person. I'm just someone who understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply refusing to be destroyed by someone else's betrayal. Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.